Hello, everybody. You are listening to the Ashita Anime Podcast, number 3. I am Marlon, and today's guest is Charles from Beneath the Tangles. We've had a pretty good history together. I've actually met Charles way back when I first started blogging over a year ago, and we've had a terrific dialogue over the course of our considering that he's been going longer than me, the course of my blogging hobby, and I'd like to go ahead and thank Charles right away for giving me so much support. And today we're going to do a little talk about current anime, Chuunibyou, or as the English title is suggested, despite my childish delusions of grandeur, I still want love. So, Charles, how's it going?
It's going good. It's a little weird to actually be speaking with you, to hear your voice. You know what
Did
I
you
mean?
listen to any of my previous
Normally the chat's fine.
podcasts?
I'm sorry?
Did you listen to any of my previous podcasts?
Yeah, I listened to the first one, but
All
to
right.
to actually talk to you is a little bit different, you know?
All right. Yeah, everybody for some reason seems to think that I have a higher voice for some reason, and they're not expecting me to be so deep. That's the reaction I get from most people when compared to when they've read my work and then they hear my voice. Because I've done a little bit like this in the past when I was in college when we were just talking about music on the radio station.
Well, it's good to come out more manly than people anticipate than less, I guess.
I don't know. Anyway, Chuunibyou. Um, Here's kind of my reason for being so interested in Chuunibyou. I'm getting a lot out of it as an atheist because I really see it as a really good metaphor for the relationship of having come out of religion and now being a non-believer. I see Yuta as being that in that atheist mindset, looking back at Rika and seeing what he used to be, and kind of half being, half feeling sorry for her, and half wanting to bring her into his way of thinking, and also the issue of having that shame of once being like her. What's your reason for liking Chuunibyou?
You know, I think that's a real interesting assessment. And, when I first heard you mention that, um, I thought, hey, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That really clicks. I, of course, am coming from a very different angle as a committed Christian, so I was thinking something very different. And when I was first watching it, right at the very beginning, I was thinking of Yuta as someone who was actually doing the opposite and maturing in his faith. What first came to mind was when Paul writes about leaving childish ways behind. And so the eighth grade syndrome, or however you refer to it, to me feels like immaturity, but still within the faith. And Yuta is representing someone who is moving away from a milk diet, kind of as the Bible refers to it, and moving to a solid diet and growing in his faith. So I saw something very much the opposite of what you saw, but I think equally as something I identify with.
Yeah, I can definitely see how you would look at it like that. Obviously, having been a former believer myself, that kind of goes to another thing that I'm seeing in Chuunibyou now as the series is developing a little bit more. Yuta is um, he, he's accepting of Rika, even though she reminds him of something that he doesn't particularly care for, something in his past that he's ashamed about. But at the same time, being a former believer, like me, he can still talk to the believer. He can still talk to Rika. He can speak her language. He understands what she's saying and how to communicate with her in ways that other people may not really understand. I mean, I think that the majority of atheists come out of faith, but there are a few atheists that I know who never believed, and they have a much harder time relating to believers. So there is that issue of Yuta speaks the language in the same way that I can speak your language because I came out of the faith. I understand that kind of that way of thinking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and with the series, there's I guess they're developing that romantic angle between Yuta and Rika. But what I see is more of at this point at least more of that kind of guidance that you mentioned, and that kind of what you said kind of leads me to think about another topic, and that's about how there's a lot of antagonism sometimes between atheists and Christians. You have people on
Mm,
the extreme side of the spectrum on both sides, and
definitely.
definitely when you can speak that language though, like you mentioned, where you can understand each other a little bit better. I think that there's a way you can relate to each other, and while Yuta definitely doesn't want to go back to what Rika is currently in. He's helping her along and relating to her, and sometimes retreating a little bit back to what he was just to speak that language to her and comfort her. And I think there's that relation there between them, and the same thing with atheists and Christians, where you can kind of meet in that middle ground and actually have a good discussion because you understand each other a little bit.
Mhm. That's definitely a good way of thinking about it. Um, I just want to go through a few specific points that I've seen in the series so far. So I'm sorry for anybody who's gotten this far into the podcast already, but I'm going to go ahead and give you a warning. If you have not watched Chuunibyou at this point, I'm going to be revealing a few spoilers right here. So if you were looking forward to listening to the whole podcast, but you haven't been watching Chuunibyou and you don't want any spoilers, you should probably stop right now. So I'm going to divulge some probably important details that may you may not want to hear. So this is a fair warning. You have been warned. This podcast will contain spoilers. So one of the things that really stood out for me to like as a metaphor for this relationship of the atheist and the believer is how Rika sees the world. Like when they go into those fight sequences, like we're seeing the world through Rika's imagination. Almost like this is how the believer sees the world. Forgive me if I'm using derogatory terminology or to describe how I see this. It's kind of hard to sometimes shape my metaphors as tactfully as I'd like to, but it's like she has the God glasses on. She like the rose-colored glasses
Hmm.
that the believer that a lot of atheists think that believers have the blinders, so to speak, that only let them see the world the way that they want to see it. Their beliefs are shaping the world incorrectly and forming that they find false meaning in things that actually mean other things. That atheists want to live in a world where everybody sees the same thing and can accept things the same way, so that we're all talking about the same stuff. There's no confusion. It's not so much as we want to subjugate people into thinking like we do. We just want to be able to communicate with people and agree on certain things so that we can live peacefully. And Rika has that view of the world that is just it's wrong from it's distorted. It's not reality. What's your reaction to that kind of accusation?
Um, you know, uh, uh, what you're the comparison that you're making right here is, I mean, it's a good one. I mean, I understand it. Um, Obviously, we as the viewers see that, and, some of the funniest scenes of the series, we see that, everything is for show, and they're totally buying into it, but an outside observer realizes everything's fake. So, I mean, that doesn't, if we go with that illusion, that doesn't cast Christianity in a good light, obviously. But, I I buy into it a little bit what you're saying because Christians do believe in an invisible world. Okay, there are things that can't be seen, and that's exactly what Rika and Dekomori are seeing. Something that other people aren't seeing. Um, obviously from the viewer angle, we're seeing it as this is something that's false, that's not really real. And so while I think your illusion works better than mine, um, what I'm taking away from this though is something a little bit different. Um,
Hmm.
Going along with the idea of maturing from the faith or in the faith, um, what I see, and let me get my thoughts together real quick. It just left me. Um, but what I'm seeing is in I think a lot of times when people talk about Christians and kind of have stereotypes about Christians, we're looking at conservative American Christian culture, and a lot of times the people in this culture, the people who declare themselves Christians, but show the very opposite of love, are people I would consider maybe comparable to Rika, people who are immature in their faith, that are not diving into Scripture, not understanding what they believe, or just believing something because they've been told that or been raised in that. And then once again, that's kind of why I see Yuta as someone who's maturing in his faith, someone who's maybe analogous to having really finally understood why they believe what they believe and really deepening the relationship with Christ, and trying to say, hey, what you're doing here or what you're seeing really isn't reality. You need to understand what reality is. And of course, for you, reality means there's no God. But from my point of view, reality says, hey, what you're believing in is something that's really man-made, a man-made structure of religion rather than the relationship that a lot of Christians like myself talk about. So that's kind of what I'm seeing with my God glasses on when I'm watching the series.
Yeah, like I said, I don't want to. You kind of brought this up already. I don't want to paint any kind of. I want to paint Christians with a broad brush. I know that, as you already said, I'm glad you said this, that the conservative Christianity in America does um, put that stereotype out there that it's an easy stereotype for opponents of Christianity to latch onto, but even I want to say that as an atheist myself, I know that all Christians are not like that, and I don't want to paint all Christians like that because
Yeah.
people in my own family are still Christians, and they're great people, and over the years, well, the year and a half now that I've been speaking with you, I can tell that you are much more mature in your faith than they are, and then
Thank
the conservatives in America. So that's good, and that's probably one of the reasons that we are able to have a mature conversation like this, because I think that we both understand our own perspectives well enough that we can reconcile with each other.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I think sometimes we tiptoe around things and we try to be sensitive about stuff, but I mean, it's okay. I think like if we're friends. If you understand someone, and understand who they are, I think you're able to be a little bit more open, and and if and also from the Christian perspective, if you're really committed to your faith, you really believe what you believe in. I think you should be very open to discussion, because what do you have to fear? So
Absolutely.
it's good talk.
I've always been of the position that just put the information out there, put the facts out there, and let people decide for themselves
Absolutely.
what is real. Because what's real, the truth, will stand up on its own. If you're building a house of cards on a shaky foundation, it's going to fall over. But if it's on a firm foundation, then then you got something. That's
Or
kind of
or to,
how I look at it.
or to use the biblical example, if you were to build a house on sand, it's wash away. So I had to throw that in there.
That's fine. I have another example from the anime. This kind of goes into some of the light episodes, the extra episodes that are coming out as the series continues. These little flavor episodes that those little short minute, like 5 minute episodes that just kind of like give a little more backstory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Rika, she makes excuses when she gets proven wrong in the atheist versus Christian debate. Atheists call this moving the goalposts. Like that one point when Rika tries to conjure a fake English personality, but when she has to back out of it when the teacher calls her on it, and so she has to give up the farce. And then there's Rika and Dekamori's wild goose chase for the unseen horizon that Yuta sends them on. They don't blame the failure on the possibility of the unseen horizon not existing. They blame it on the weather. That it's an excuse. They have to. They're constantly making excuses as to why their beliefs aren't working. And I think that's another good example of the atheist versus Christianity perspective. How do you feel about that? Being accused of moving the goalposts when confronted with something that doesn't make sense with your biblical worldview.
Um, that's I think again that goes back to I think as Christians we really need to engage our own minds and to really look more deeply into what we believe because uh, definitely during when I was in high school and even starting college, first few years of college, I was this conservative Christian and a hypocrite to boot. So I was the type of person who would move the goalposts. And maybe I do that now. I don't know. Someone needs to confront me and tell me what I'm doing if I'm trying to discuss or argue about Christianity. But I think as you deepen your relationship or and maybe better terminology to know more about your faith, you start understanding that not everything you're taught is real is true. You'll have to come to some conclusions yourself or listen to others and see what they say. And at the same time, you come to realize that you don't always have the answers. So you may be challenged to something by an atheist, and you may just not have the answer. If someone comes to me and tries to have a debate regarding the science of the Bible and saying, hey, this can't be real, this can't be true, this is the way it is, this is the way it is. I have some facts I can spew out. I've got arguments I can throw out probably, but I don't understand it well enough. I took up to like organic chemistry in college, but even then I didn't really understand the science so well. So I'm not going to say, hey, this is this way, this is that way. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe you're right, and at the very least, I don't really have a good response for you, And I think that that as Christians, we need to be open that way and to be, I guess, intellectually honest with ourselves and say, hey, we might not know all the answers. We may not have good answers for you. You may have the better answers right now, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that what we believe is wrong, and at the same time, I think it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, we're not these stuffy people that, and some of us are, but we're not necessarily the stuffy people that we're made out to be, that we can be open and we can have conversation and engage and learn from one another. So hopefully more and more of us are not moving the goalposts or whatever the phrase is, but instead listening and being open. But that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. I hadn't thought of that while I was watching that, but that's a really good point.
Yeah, something you may not know about me, maybe we didn't discuss this. I actually have a minor in geology. So I actually know my earth science quite well. So I have a pretty deep breadth of knowledge of fossils and deep time. For anybody who's a young Earth creationist, I can explain parallax in the stars and how we know the speed of light and how carbon dating works. And it's not just carbon dating; it's radiocarbon dating and radiometric dating, all the other kinds of decay of elements and stuff like that, and how we know that the world is 4.5 billion years old, and we know that the universe is almost 14 billion years old, and so all that kind of stuff. I can explain that because I studied it. I actually studied it in college. I didn't just read about it and or hear about it in documentaries. So I actually do
Yeah,
have education in that.
we should talk sometime. I have one of my best friends was a major in geology, and he's one of the leaders at our church. And then, like I had mentioned to you before, one of our co-bloggers, R86, is a chemistry professor, and I know another physics professor is a Christian. So I don't know what they think about creationism, creation science, young Earth, old Earth. I'd be interested in hearing what they think, and then getting back to you and maybe talking a little bit more about this. But
All right.
it's good to know that.
Let's leave that for another time. Let's get back on topic.
Yeah.
Something that I kind of wanted to transition into next is when you said when we were talking about moving the goalposts. Another thing that's kind of related to that is what I kind of consider to be the showstopper for pretty much any conversation between an atheist and a believer is this. There are so many believers who, when you ask them, what would it take for you to disbelieve God, to give up your faith, and they say nothing. There's nothing you can say that would make me change my mind. It's just like, well, that this conversation is over. We don't have any more dialogue to continue from here because you're not listening to anything that I'm saying. That's the atheist viewpoint. And there's a point there's something that happens like this in Chuunibyou, when Dekumori is confronted by Nibutani, the author of that fantasy book that she carries around with her. And even when Dekumori is confronted by the author of her holy book, so to speak, and the author says, "I made all this up. It's all a lie." Dekumori still refuses to believe that it's possible that what she has is a lie. She doesn't believe it because belief is more important than the facts. And how do you feel about that kind of thing? How
I,
do you react? I'm,
I
I'm,
suppose it.
I'm almost scared to ask you. Is there anything that anybody could say that would make you disbelieve God? That would make you at least question the existence of God?
Well, I suppose if God came down and told me that the Bible was all a lie, that would might shake my faith, using that analogy. But I mean, I think there's um, we as believers obviously have faith, and faith means that there's a it's not 100% clearly right in front of us, And I think we have to be accepting of a couple things, and that's one, it's we don't have Jesus right in front of us like people did 2,000 years ago. And secondly, we're also not perfect. And I think more to that point, I think that affects how I would my personal belief about what would shake my faith. And I've always been a person of I think strong faith. That something horrible happens, I don't say, hey, there must not be a God. I say, I believe that that this is happening for a reason, that God is still there, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, I'm an imperfect Christian, and I think it would be arrogant to say that I wouldn't lose my faith for some reason. And I don't know if if what you would say from your perspective would affect my faith. It might not. I don't think so. I'm thinking more of from the perspective of someone if I lost a close family member in a very difficult way, if my children died, something like that. That might shake my faith. And right now I could say, yeah, even if that happened, I would still believe in God. But at the same time, as a person, a fragile human being, I think that might shake my faith. And kind of related to anime, a year or two ago, I read a classic Japanese novel called Silence. And basically it's the story of a Jesuit priest who goes to Japan. And it's the story of how he loses his faith. And it's very powerful, and it's based on other people's suffering and how it affected him. And I read that, and I thought that was incredibly brutally honest. And I think we're lying to ourselves if we say that, hey, there's nothing that can make me lose my faith, because you'd you'd have to be either probably completely insane or just have the most amazing faith out of anyone who's walked the planet to be able to be 100% confident in that. That's my thinking.
Yeah. That also kind of feeds into like the atheist side of this is the atheist should have give and take with this, of course. If the atheist is presented with evidence that is good and stands up to scrutiny, that yes, maybe there is a God, then the atheist should be willing to adjust their own worldview. That's kind of that give and take on that sort of thing. And I always say that there is plenty of ways to convince me that God exists. Nobody's ever presented me with one that I found satisfactory yet, obviously, which is why I'm still an atheist, but that's sort of, it comes towards being honest with your own debates with the other side, so to speak.
Yeah, and if you're confident in what you believe, whether you're an atheist or a Christian, again, you should be open to the evidence and consider it, you know. And when I was in college, I went through the phase where I didn't believe there was a God, agnostic, I would say, and I searched through a number of different religions and no religion at all. And I felt, you know, you wouldn't believe this, but I felt that God led me back to Him. And so I think from that perspective, as someone who went through that, I think we do need to investigate what we believe in and have that confidence that, you know, if we really believe this is true, well, it'll hold up to scrutiny.
Here's the next topic I want to move into that I think you could have a field day with, but let's try to keep it short so that we don't make this podcast overly long.
Sure.
There's this tendency that atheists see Christians as, particularly modern Christians, as being very loose with their faith. They take the good parts of their faith that they like, and they ignore the bad, the annoying, the parts that are difficult for them. Like how when Rika is going to go and swim in the pool, and she has that arm bandage on, and it's sealing a demon in her arm, but she says, "Oh, I have to take it off because it gets wet and heavy, and I don't like it in the pool." And it's just like, but it's sealing in the demon. What do you? What's your feeling about that? That kind of metaphor for accepting the easy stuff and ignoring the hard stuff. We could probably have a whole podcast about you talking about that, I'm sure.
I'll try to be short, but you know, to be perfectly honest, it's very uncomfortable. There are, but at the same time, again, if you're strong in your faith, you'll investigate these things. We talk about this in small group. There are things that make me very uncomfortable about the Bible. I ultimately have faith that my God is merciful and graceful, and at the same time, I understand that I don't know everything, and that brings some comfort to me. But you know, there are things. There's the conquest of the Promised Land that has a lot of issues with it for me. There's certain scenes in the Bible where it's just, was that something that God wanted to happen? Was that something that God was happy with? That seemed like such a tragedy or something just really awful. So, I mean, there are definitely things in the Bible where we need to look at. The church, I think, one thing that the church in general does poorly is focus on these difficult passages, and I think it's something that would be ideal for the church to really move toward, you know, as we go through this century, to really investigate these things, because we can't pick and choose, and that's very clear, and the Bible says so. You can't pick and choose. You can't add to it. You can't take away. And if so, the Christians are being hypocrites if we're missing these points and just focusing on the fluffy stuff. You know, we have to understand that this is our faith as a whole, even though it may contain things that we dislike. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think that's an important point.
All right. One or two more things I want to bring up. Um, Something that this is the kind of the main thing that drove me to a position of non-belief is how often the religious of all colors will defend their faith with um, expressions of personal experience. They, for example, Rika has lost her father, and she places her belief in the existence of the unseen horizon on a personal experience of having seen a vision of her father beyond the unseen horizon, and that's why she's chasing it, trying to find it, trying to find her father, trying to find a past that she's lost. And this the, this weighing a personal experience higher than evidence, higher than empirical evidence, the ability to, um, because from a scientific perspective, it can't be accepted as a part of reality. It can't be a fact unless it's been. Science is repeatable. So if an occurrence happens, it may have been just a fluke or an error in the data if it only happened one time. So this this constant I call it I think a lot of atheists call it like the retreat method. The the believer will retreat into an indefensible position, an unassailable position, I should say. That this is just my faith. I've had a personal experience uh, that you would have to have as well in order to believe what I do. And for me, I find that to be very annoying because um, it paints it paints the belief, particularly if it's Christianity, then it almost seems to me that God is picking and choosing who he wants to believe, because if God's not, well, how come God hasn't given me this personal revelation so that I can be saved as well? It seems like that's one issue of it. There's a whole other can of worms that I could go into here, but how do you feel about when a believer can't defend their faith with something more concrete? They retreat to the position of, well, this is just what I believe. I've had personal experiences. You're just going to have to accept that. What's your position on that kind of believer?
There's there's just a lot to that question. There's
Sorry.
no, no, it's I mean it's a really good and important question. And I feel like it's a very theologically heavy question too. There's a lot to it.
What
There's
was
a
well then what was your reaction to seeing Rika in that situation in the last episode when when she mentioned that personal experience like that is making her so different from Utah? What was your reaction to that then? If we let's try to keep this focused on the perspective of the anime instead of just thinking about a little bit more instead of more abstract thoughts about atheism or religion. What was your reaction to that scene in the anime then?
well, I mean it's striking in the anime because it's a very it's kind of a culmination point for her, where she has had this belief for so many years, but right in front of her face, you have evidence to the contrary. Um, and I think when we think about personal belief with Christianity, personal experience rather, um, you know, that's a heavy, huge part of the faith, and it's inseparable from it. Um, but then again, we have to, I think one thing we have to consider also is that there's a difference between having a one-time experience, and then there's kind of the frame of mind where you believe that God is working throughout your life. You connect those dots, and some people will say it's coincidence. Some people will say it's just the way things work out, and other people will say, well, it's something orchestrated. So, and I can see how an atheist might see that and say, hey, that really doesn't mean anything. But for a believer, it's something you hold dear, and something that that's individual to each person, but which does impact our faith. So that's not really a great answer, but that's just what I want to lay out there regarding that.
It's kind of interesting that how do I want to phrase this? Back when I was younger, in my teens, when I was still a believer, I was always confused when my friends and classmates would talk about having had these personal experiences, and they were so touched and moved by certain things, and it made them feel the presence of God or Jesus, what have you. And I never had anything like that as a teenager. I never felt moved by religion, and I actually felt, having become an atheist, having become a non-believer now, I feel so much more moved by what I kind of see as the reality of the situation. I feel so much more moved when I see people just genuinely helping each other, or just seeing like something that this is a little bit off topic as far as talking about the anime goes, but I think it's kind of important just to like get in there, is a lot of believers accuse atheists or scientists to some extent of being too materialistic, too naturalistic with their view of the world. That they say that it's so limiting, saying that, oh, you can only see the world as a bunch of chemical reactions and the physics of sunlight coming through the clouds and creating shadows off that mountain. It's so bland, and it's like, no, I see everything that you see, but I also see all of that more. It's making my world bigger. And that's kind of one of the things that I see in Chuunibyou as well, is Rika is so entrenched in her beliefs that she's ignoring the richness of the world that's around her, and it's hurting her. Her belief is actually a detriment to her life. How do you feel about that kind of accusation from a Christian, from a former Christian now turned atheist, that my life feels so much richer now, having given up that what I saw as a very limiting worldview? And how do you kind of feel about Rika? Because I think that we can both agree that Rika is limiting herself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The anime makes it clear from the beginning, unless something changes, that these are all delusions. But the first of all, from your perspective, this may not be an answer that's representative of Christianity or my church or whatever. But I have a friend that's kind of was in the same situation as you. He went to church. He was I discipled him actually in college, and he ended up turning away from the faith and becoming I guess as one of my friends would say, an evangelical atheist, and because he read Dawkins, and it really changed his life. Well, I told him, and I'll say the same thing to you, is that I'd rather see that of you than to be a Christian going through the motions, but not really having your heart in it or believing in it. I like to see that you're thinking about these issues. And my prayer, I don't want to sound
same to you,
condescending.
actually. I like
Thank you.
seeing Christians thinking about what they believe rather than just going through the motions as well. So
Yeah,
this is definitely a two-way road. I love talking with you about that. That's just awesome.
well, that's good to hear, because I that's not something I would normally think of as from an atheist also. But anyway, there's that. And then the regarding Rika, I think the Catholic Church possibly less so, and actually definitely less so, but the Protestant church, at least in America, is very, very inwardly and narrowly focused in general. There's been a pretty big shift in the last several years with different types of churches coming up and really focusing on looking outwardly. And part of what I try to do with my blog is to look at anime. I mean, how many Christians are looking at anime from a Christian perspective? We're trying to look outwardly, trying to look at the world and trying to enjoy it too. I mean, I'm really in the grand scheme of things very, very conservative in my lifestyle, but that's just a personal choice. I believe that a lot of what we have here is a good gift from God for us to enjoy. So there's that way of being open to the world, but also understanding that there are people out there that are in need. You talk about people helping others. Well, the church gives a lot, but then a lot of people outside the church give a lot also. And I think the church really needs to think about, what are we doing? Are we loving each other? Are we loving others? Are we really loving others? Or are we really just doing things for ourselves? And I think too much we're doing things for ourselves and not really seeing the outside world and who needs our assistance, and that we don't need to just necessarily be going door to door thumping people over the heads with the Bible, but really just going out there and helping others and seeing that there is a greater world beyond our pews.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you say you're so different from one of my former coworkers who will remain anonymous at this point, well, forever, really, because it's just not good practice to talk about people behind their back, I feel. But saying that anime is a gift from God is completely antithetical to what he believed. He said that anime is of the devil and that it leads people away from Jesus because of like ecchi themes and the themes of like yokai and Shinto, and how magic has this light and dark, and you want to be the light magic guy, and the dark magic is bad, but the whole it's the Eastern view of magic, but from the Christian perspective, all magic is bad, and that kind of stuff. And so it was difficult having that conversation with him, being as big of an anime fan as I am, and it really kind of hurt me to hear him talk in such a way, because he actually told me that he used to be an anime fan before he got saved, and he destroyed all of his manga and DVDs when he became a true believer, so to speak. So it's just, you're so different from him. It's refreshing, really.
I think to be honest, I mean, I went through, I didn't go to that extent, but I've been through a stage like that, and I think what Christians have to do is look at the Bible itself. I mean, the Bible is full of violence, adultery, infanticide, murder, and that doesn't mean that we should burn the Bible. We gotta look at the themes. We gotta look at what it expresses. We gotta see what we learn from it, what we can find in it, and what we enjoy from it too, as a piece of literature. So, I mean, there's a lot to draw from things. If I was to watch, I mean, there are certain series I avoid watching. If there was a series that, for example, like had two characters in an adulterous relationship, and the series really made that seem like a wonderful, happy thing. Well, I'd actually probably watch that and write about it. But if I didn't have a blog, I'd probably just avoid it, because that's not something that I want to partake in and enjoy in. So, I mean, there's both sides to that perspective where, you don't want to partake in things that you don't believe are morally right. But at the same time, you can learn from stuff, you can enjoy stuff, and you can, you need to look at overlying themes and say, hey, well, this show has a lot of violence, but those are bad guys committing the violence, and the good guys are trying to stop the violence and so forth. It's very basic stuff that Christians sometimes just miss because we've got our blinders on.
Mm. Final thought. This is what let's each talk about what we're taking away from Chuunibyou at this point. Do a little summary. What I'm really taking away from Chuunibyou at this point is how your real friends the people you really want to be you want to be close with are the people who don't judge you for your hobbies, who don't judge you for your beliefs, who look at you as a person and decide whether or not that you are a good person and just accept you as you are. They don't try to um, I don't want to say that it's not that they don't try to change you, but they try to make you better. They try
Right.
that relation the being friends with somebody should make both people better rather than trying to change somebody to make them more like the other person. And that's the theme that I'm getting from Chuunibyou right now, and I find that to be very uplifting, and I find that to be really cool. I really am enjoying Chuunibyou right now. Depending on how it ends, it might even make my top 5 for anime of the year when I do that post in a couple of months. So that's my final thought on Chuunibyou. It's about having good friends and non-judgmental friends. Those are the people that you want in your life. What are you taking from Chuunibyou?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's perfect. And I think I might only add that that there's a genuineness in their relationships. You know, too often you can have a group of friends for a long time and not really know each other. You know, and this group here, for the most part, they know the worst secrets about each other, and it's just kind of they've kind of forced into that pattern. But because of that, they can be themselves around each other. And again, like you said, they're not judging each other, and in many instances, they're helping each other up. They're improving each other. Like Yuta with his what's the guy friend whose head he shaved. You know, the group kind of or he said, well, you kind of have to go through with this, and they helped him become more of a man of character, and then supported him when the girl who wrote the note to him didn't show up. You know,
Ishiki.
they were able to improve him. You know, and
His
help
name
him.
is Ishiki.
Yes, that's right. So I mean, it really is about friendship, and it's been a surprisingly enjoyable series, and it's definitely so far been one of my favorites this year as well.
Hmm. That's great. Were there any other topics you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to?
No, I was pretty thorough, and
All right.
thanks so much for bringing all that up. It was a good conversation.
Great. I had fun talking to you. Let's do this again sometime. And to
Absolutely.
everybody who listened, thanks for listening. And keep reading. I will link in the description to both my blog and Charles' blog. Charles, if you want to post a link to this on your site, go ahead and feel free to. We were both bloggers here. There's no reason that this should be limited to my blog, of course. So, uh,
Absolutely.
and of course, if you enjoyed listening and you want to uh, have a conversation with me and do a little podcast, please get in contact with me. I'm always looking for new topics, new people, and just thank you, everybody. I always have fun talking about this. This is the reason that I am an anime blogger. So thanks for listening, everybody. Bye bye.